The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Today we have the ASPPH Presents Student Services Spotlight. So today we'll be presenting on digital marketing strategies, success stories for student affairs. I will be one of your panelists and hosts for today. I'm Emily Gordon. I work as the Student Services Coordinator at ASPPH. And we are also going to be joined by Nick Moran. I'll let him go ahead and introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Moran. I'm the Digital Media Manager at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And here at the school, I manage a lot of the digital marketing efforts, including social media, which I work on with another team member who's actually on the call right now, if everyone wants to give a shout out to Marissa Russell. And then we also manage the school's daily news service called Global Health Now, which has its own social media output as well.
Great. Thank you, Nick. So before we get started, I just want to let you guys know some reminders. So we will be answering questions towards the end. So you guys can see, you can join the conversation. You should all have this questions tab here, where you'll be able to submit, and then we'll get those and field those at the end. So I'll be on the call. Nick will be able to answer questions, and then in the middle, we'll have some ambassadors on the call. So as long as they stay till the end, you guys will be able to ask them a few questions as well. And another just note, I know it says handouts down here at the bottom, probably under questions. GoToWebinar is having a few issues with making that live at the moment, but we'll make sure that the presentation slides are sent in the email where you'll get a recording of this webinar as well. All right. So learning objectives for the day, we want to give you guys some examples of social media platforms used for marketing, recruiting, and educational awareness. We are going to discuss common campaign strategies and evaluation methods, and then explain how you can repurpose some general public health news and existing content you might already have for campaigns for your institution. So getting started, I'll start off. I'm going to be talking about prospective and current student engagement. And to give you guys a little bit of perspective for ASPPH as a whole. So you all know that ASPPH is the voice of accredited academic public health, representing schools and programs accredited by CEEF. So ASPPH in the media, we primarily focus on promoting our members, research and outreach programs. We'll promote public health advocacy and member resources. So you can find ASPPH on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. But what we'll do today is we'll go in depth about Sophus and This is Public Health. So those are two brands run through ASPPH that really focus on social media as their main campaign and branding strategy. So we'll start with Sophus. So on Facebook, we have almost 4,000 likes and about 600 followers on Twitter. This tends to fluctuate with the application season. A lot of people will follow kind of throughout August and September when the application opens, and then as they submit applications and get more communications from you guys in your admissions department, it kind of decreases on our end. But in terms of what we do with Sophus, we'll send out a variety of reminders. So we'll promote the Sophus newsletter and the application tips and public health events in there. We will respond to students if they have any questions about the application, if they aren't able to log in, and really do what we can to get them in touch with customer service without answering their application questions directly on social media for confidentiality reasons. We'll promote our Sophus member events as well as our This is Public Health events. And then one thing we started doing this year is application videos. So throughout the year, the application cycle will be sending out a variety of videos reminding students when the application is open, some tips for submitting, when they can submit, and deadlines, how to fill out their transcripts, things along those lines to kind of garner some more engagement and give students another perspective towards the application than just a checklist, which they typically see when they log into the platform. All right. And one thing to keep in mind, so with Sophus, we have some fairly specific goals and some fairly specific strategies to meet those goals. So the first thing is really being aware and providing awareness of application cycle and those deadlines. So for students, what we do is we'll send out reminders so they get those in an email, and we make sure that on the 1st and the 15th, when the traditional applications are due, they'll see that on social media, kind of to prime their brains to make sure that they could submit in the next following days. application need to know videos. So those are the videos that I just mentioned that we put on Facebook and Twitter to kind of remind students. These are some tips that you need to know when submitting your application or even getting started. Also general FAQs. So if it's not highlighted in one of the videos we have for this year, we'll send out reminders on social media. So that could be just logging in, that could be checking your transcripts, that could be when can you submit. A lot of students don't know that they can submit as soon as their information is complete. They don't necessarily have to wait for all of their transcripts or all of their recommendations to be in. So that's a general FAQ that we might publish, not in one of those videos. All right, so the second goal is really, once again, those application tips and ease of application. So we want students to know that SOFIS is their #1 application for public health schools and programs, but also that it's easy. A lot of people think that a centralized application is going to be super complex. It's going to be really hard. They kind of associate it with the med school application or law school application, which is just jumping through hoops before they can even press submit. But we kind of let them know it's okay with the SOFIS newsletter. So that goes out once a month. Once again, that'll have application tips in there. It really shows them a detailed structure of this is how you can submit the application and these are the minimum steps you need to do that. It kind of gives students a little bit more authority when they're filling out their application and know that it's not as complex as some of these other centralized application systems. We also promote My SOFIS, which is their customized Pearl page, and then the customer service support team. So they are going to be their #1 go-to other than the My SOFIS inquiry form. And I make sure that in any communications we send out, they have their phone number and email address, just because we try to promote as many students going to the support team as we can, because we shouldn't be asking questions on social media. It's a great resource for them, but we really would like to keep everyone, anyone who contacts SOFIS, we would prefer for it to be through that customer service team. So we try and focus as many communications there as possible. And then the third goal is really promotion of how to engage with SOFIS and with members. So once again, the customer service team, how they can get in touch with their My SOFIS page and submit inquiry forms or see some of the resources that we have posted on there. And then SOFIS events. So every SOFIS school can submit their events to be on the webpage, but we also promote those on social media. And we want to be as transparent as possible of how, if you're submitting a SOFIS application, how can you then go and connect with those schools that you just applied to. So they'll see them on the SOFIS event page. They'll see all of this as public health events, and then every SOFIS member who has an event they'll see that on social media and the event calendar as well. So just some tips. Member events right there. Already touched base on that. So just some tips when it comes to creating these goals and strategies and evaluation is, one, think about the content you already have. So the good thing about SOFIS is that there's already a pretty substantial FAQs and tip sheet. So you can find that either on the website or in the application. And it's really easy for us to repurpose that content and repurpose some of the content in terms of events that we have for members to create that content engaging and keep it changing throughout the week. So it's not just a deadline every day on the 1st. It's not just a newsletter going out on the 12th. You know, we kind of switch it up throughout the year. The next thing is, where is your information most valued or engaged? So one thing that we're realizing is that with SOFIS, we really want to expand the reach and the views. So you saw earlier that we don't necessarily have a big following on Twitter, but those reaches and those views are going to a much, much larger audience than people who actually click follow. It's also really important for us to get quick responses, just because that reflects on how people rate or view the application system. And even though it encompasses 96 schools and programs, people really want to know that their questions are going to be answered and have that customer service face-to-face as soon as possible. Another thing in terms of tools and where you're finding engagement is, so we use Business for Facebook, so that will host all of our application, all of our brands for ASPPH. And that's something where we can individually see what's working and what's not. So we find that we've only put out 2 videos, but we're getting a fair amount of engagement on them. So that's something that we're probably going to keep up throughout the year. And member events, they are probably one of the #1 engagement points that we have on Facebook and Twitter. So that's something to keep track of throughout the year and really continue to promote those as we move forward. Google Analytics and Google Insights, those are really good when it comes to finding out what content works, and especially where your reach is going, and scheduling tools. Since we have so many SOFAS member events, it's really easy for us to schedule in advance when things are going to be promoted, and kind of, at least for SOFAS, takes a little bit of the work off of our plate early on. So moving on, we're going to switch gears and kind of talk about This is Public Health, which is more of the prospective student outreach rather than the application outreach. So as many of you know, This is Public Health is a social media campaign used to brand public health and raise awareness of how public health affects individuals, families, communities, and populations. So it started as a sticker campaign on social media, so people could post the sticker, put it on social media with the hashtag This is Public Health. So kind of, once again, you're raising awareness, putting a face or a title to something that people see every day. Like in this photo, no smoking within 25 feet of the building, which people don't always associate with public health unless you have that image there. So you can see the hashtag. And what this has really turned into is a whole host of things. So we have our member schools and programs promoting public health initiatives on their campus. We have the This is Public Health grad school fairs, and people talking to us about those and what they like and what they don't like. We participate in individual campaigns, so that we have a recap from the ALS challenge, and sometimes our member schools or our ambassadors will participate in events like that. We even promote news and media. I know that we promote some of the stuff that Nick puts out through Hopkins and from some of our other member schools, and we try and keep that up to date. So we're really trying to promote a broad spectrum of what public health is, so what it is in your community, what it is in academics, and what it is in research. And all of that falls under this general sticker campaign and that hashtag, This is Public Health. So putting that into perspective, this is a 14-day cast of the This is Public Health hashtag. And to keep in mind, this is only on Instagram and Twitter. So we can't see where it is on Facebook or if it's used on Snapchat or any other platforms along those lines. So in 14 days, we had 200 posts, 148 unique users, over 121 engagements on all of those 200 posts. And as you can see, the reach is over 100,000, and same with impressions. And if you look at this map up here, you can see that it's not just in the United States. So we have Africa, we have parts of Europe, India and Asia, Australia, and this is once again only in those 14 days. And if you look down here, you can see that we have individuals posting, we have our members, we have organizations like the CDC. It has really become an influential campaign that's not just focused about prospective students. If you go and look at some of the posts that are going on, people are really using this to engage their own communities and what public health is. So even though we primarily use it as a prospective student campaign, it's really expanding the discussion of what public health is and how people can get involved. All right, and we have on Facebook, we have over 12,000 followers and likes. On Twitter, we're about over 1,000, which is pretty good since we haven't had the account very long. I think a year, maybe like 15 months max. And in the past 3 months, Facebook has grown 5%. We're going a little out of order. Instagram, we have over 9,000 followers, and that grows about 23% within the 3 months. What is this? Twitter here grew about 22%, and then unfortunately Snapchat we have, but we can't get any analytics on that. It's really just a platform we use for our ambassadors, but when you average all of this out, you can see that This is Public Health is growing about 7% every 3 months, really with most of the focus being on Instagram and Twitter. And I'll kind of segue this data into the next slide. But it's really important to see where your growth is and really utilize that for any goals or strategies that you have. So like I said, segueing into goals and strategies. So really the main goal of This is Public Health is to increase awareness of public health in general, but also as an academic and professional career path. So you can see that with that 7% growth and that 22 and 23% growth, we really have a lot of room on Instagram and Twitter to focus on this. So some of the things we do, obviously we have the hashtag. We've recently promoted In Case You Missed It Monday, so that we do every Monday, where we can repurpose what people are tagging us in to highlight an area of public health, highlight a topic, a message, really whatever seems to be happening over the past week, we can repurpose that with the larger brand. We have the This is Public Health newsletter and the book club, which are also two ways to kind of promote what's going on in public health in general, and then those academic resources. Also to provide insight into graduate public health. So that's where Instagram and Snapchat, even Twitter, are really, really important. So we have the This is Public Health chats, which are Twitter chats with professionals, current students, some of our member organizations participate, and I Heart Public Health Month. So that's going to be a social media campaign that we run in February to promote why people love public health. But the big thing is really these ambassador takeovers. So these happen on Instagram and Snapchat, and the ambassadors have free reign to do whatever they want throughout the week. So they promote their research, they promote their school, what they're doing in class, part-time jobs, things along those lines. And that's really where we see most engagement on those two platforms, which do tend to highlight a younger audience. They're really geared towards that interactive, personal feel, which works for us because we're looking at prospective students, not only for promoting public health in general, but really getting them involved in graduate school. And the ambassadors have more of a personal touch to do that. All right, and the last thing, well, at least the last goal of This is Public Health, is to promote the fairs and other events that we have. So we do live story features throughout the week. We have Facebook ads, Facebook events, but really, once again, it's these live story features of engaging prospective students with the ambassadors, or engaging them with the events so that they see that This is Public Health is more than just a hashtag, so that they have a personal story and a personal connection before they even attend the fairs. They can see what they're doing, they can see who we're meeting with, they can see what members are going to be there beforehand. All right, now hopefully I should have 3 ambassadors on the call who have all done a takeover within the past year, and they're going to talk a little bit about some of their highlights, some engagement strategies they use to get in touch with prospective students, and then how they engage with their own institutions on social media. So I have Antonio Foles. He is an MBA, MPH student from University of Alabama, Birmingham School of Public Health. Alante Moon is an MPH student from University of Michigan School of Public Health. And then Katie Elverby is a PhD from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. So I'm going to mute myself and let you guys get started. I think, Antonio, if you're on, we should go down the list that way.
Okay, sounds good. Do you want me to just answer like one question at a time, or kind of go through all of them?
Let's go through all of them.
Okay,
to
cool.
make it easier for you guys.
Sounds good. So hey everyone, my name is Antonio Foles. This is my second year as an ambassador. And during the time of my initial takeover, I was working as an LGBTQ educator while also pursuing my MPH MBA. And during my takeover, I actually got the most engagement whenever I posted about some of the work I was doing, some of the curriculum work I was doing or the meetings I was having, just kind of going more into depth of the work that I was doing. Because obviously I can post about my classes and things like that, but students are kind of used to seeing those kind of posts. But once I got to actually talk about my work and the field that I was actually passionate about, which was obviously queer competency, I actually had a lot of people message me directly on the Instagram, asking me about it and things like that. And I actually connected with other ambassadors who do similar work, so it's really unique to see that. But during that takeover, I say some of the best engagement strategies you can do is, first off, is just keep it very simple. You don't want to have too much information overload. There's a lot of statistics and data out there showing that as a millennial or just even as a person, we don't spend too much time looking at a page. You know, we're constantly tapping through things. We're not going to read a post that has like 3 paragraphs long on it. We want it kind of short and simple. That's kind of how I kept it, but also just very, I guess, eye-catching at the same time. That's one thing as well, is when you're trying to get people to look at what you're doing, you kind of also want to have it very aesthetically pleasing. You don't want to have blurry pictures or things that are just kind of like bled. You kind of want to have like a very clear picture of whatever it is you're trying to promote. And I know that with things like Instagram, there's at the time a year ago, Instagram has changed so much, but if you're gonna do like for our takeovers, like we can utilize boomerangs, we can take videos, we can do polls, we can link articles and things like that to your post. And so those are things that are very helpful. And that leads me into kind of the last point, is how I interact with other brands, is that they are always like, you know, they'll have an Insta post and be like, tag 2 friends for a giveaway, things like that, or they'll post a link to, you know, a shirt they're selling. Things like that, it really gets me more engaged, and it makes kind of the steps easier. Whereas if they just posted a picture of a shirt, you know, then I have to go through their website and kind of find it. Whereas if they already link it, like the information is there for me. So whatever you're trying to promote, if you're going to try and promote an application, you know, maybe already provide that link in your bio or in the post to make that one step easier. And I will say, lastly, the way that I really got engaged and to really increase my outreach was that I promoted on my own social media. So I know when I did my takeover, I posted on my own personal account, and some of my friends who are even public health majors or public health minors didn't really know about ASPPH or This is Public Health. And I know I saw a lot of them follow the account, and it got more interested people. And I actually had my own member institution. I had UAB feature me, and I actually had one student from Iowa ask me about the graduate program here. And then actually a Peace Corps volunteer from Cameroon reached out to me because they saw me post it on there. So just having that transparency and kind of having a clear view and plan is pretty much helpful in getting more people engaged.
Thank you for sharing, Antonio. And I know you are set to do a takeover in the next few weeks. Am I correct?
Yes, I think like first or second week of October.
Perfect. So you guys can get more of Antonio and his work in just a few weeks. But I think what we're going to do is pass it over to Alante next. And she did a takeover this past July. I see her on the call. Brian, are you able to unmute her? Alante, I think you are self-muted.
Hello, everyone.
Perfect. You're all set. Yep.
So hello, everyone. I'm Alante Moon. I'm a second-year HBHE student at University of Michigan, and I just recently did my takeover this summer. I was in Trinidad and Tobago doing a pilot study on perceived risk of oil exposure and how Trinidadians were able to cope with that oil exposure. So we did a questionnaire. So throughout the week, I was able to showcase myself, you know, at different clinics, doing surveys, showing the various public health signage that was at the clinics, also sharing our different accomplishments throughout the week. We were able to complete 389 surveys in 6 weeks. So we were really, really excited about that. Also just showcasing some of the challenges we faced as well. So I basically showed my life as a graduate student and researcher in Trinidad. So it was a great experience. In terms of like engagement strategies, I definitely agree with Antonio. I also shared on all of my social media pages that I will be doing this takeover. So I had a lot of students from U of M who didn't even know about CIPH. So they were able to log on and see, my everyday life. Also, just being active, I think helped. I at least posted 3 to 4 times a day, just showing what was going on. And just the power of hashtags, using CIPH and also tagging U of M, alumni. Everyone was really engaged with it. Also, just that first post I made sure, I said, feel free to message me and ask any questions that you have, just so people know that I am willing to, answer any questions. And so then for how do you engage your institution, just being, I really think you need to be authentic and be yourself when doing a social media takeover. And that's what I did. Like, I don't have, I'm not a social media expert or anything like that, but when you are yourself, people can see that. So also just using boomerangs, like Antonio said, social media polls and comment below, things like that. And also just tagging whoever you're working with, making sure that you're tagging people you have in your pictures and things like that, remembering your partnerships and people you work with. So yeah, that's me.
Great, thank you. So one thing that Alante mentioned is power of the hashtag. People will search that and people will find you from all kinds of hashtags. So that's always something to think about when you are creating posts. What can you include and how can you connect your posts to another topic or another school or that community partner? So that's something really good that she mentioned to kind of take into consideration. I am scrolling, and unfortunately, I do not see Katie on the call. I know she had some obligations with school, so she was possibly going to join late. So what I'm going to do is pass it. Well, I think I have one more slide, yes, and then I'll pass it over to Nick. So Antonio and Alante kind of touched on this. So you want to think about what is important or unique. What is important or unique about your institution? What kind of story do you want to tell about student services, and what kind of resources and offerings do you want to focus on in that story and promote what you're serving, what you have at student services? And once again, where is that valued or engaged? So where are students going to talk to you? And if that is a private medium or something more social like Instagram or Twitter. And in terms of tips and evaluations, what's most important? So one for us, it's reach, especially when it comes to Twitter and Instagram. How many people are we reaching on every individual post? And then when it comes to events, how many of those people who are viewing or somehow getting in touch with This is Public Health, how are they responding to our events? So are they coming to a This is Public Health chat? Are they coming to the book club? Are they coming to an in-person fair? Like, what avenues are most appropriate for that? And one thing that we're learning with this book club, which we did the first discussion back in August, is that Twitter is not the place for the book club at all. And really all of our engagement was on the Goodreads platform. So that's something that we are working with to kind of figure out where our reach is best going to be used and where those event RSVPs are going to come from. And that's part of that reevaluate bullet point I have down there. And then once again, telling an authentic story. So both Antonio and Alante mentioned this. And really being true to what you're offering as student services, being true to what you're offering and promoting as an admissions department, and telling that story effectively. And they both mentioned this. So this I just thought was a good note. I don't have time for fake friends anymore, either going to real or be gone. And students will recognize this, whether it's a prospective student or admitted student. They know whether or not what you're promoting on social media is accurate or is real, and they can tell the difference between that if they're coming in a prospective student and all your pictures are super sunny and there are kids out, but if it snows all the time, like, they'll know. They kind of have an idea of what the school is like, and they want to see more of that, and they want to see more of that student and graduate student life on social media. So that is what I have for now. I'm going to go ahead and just advance to the next slide. And Nick, I will pass it on over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Emily, and thanks, Antonio and Alante for weighing in on that. So my name is Nick Moran, and I'm the digital media manager here at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School. And I am going to talk about how we are using social from sort of the institutional side of things, which is a little bit different from the This is Public Health campaigns. So at the school, we use social for 4 primary objectives, and those would be content distribution, so just like getting our content out to an audience, engagement and community management, which is sort of like interacting with people who have questions about the school, and then marketing and advertising, obviously. Usually I'm referring, when I talk about marketing and advertising, to paid social. And then 4th is listening, and that's sort of the nice euphemism for just making sure that when we're being talked about in a public forum like social, that people are saying good things about us, and if they're not, maybe what we can do about that, and if we should address that, and things like that. But to take you through just one case study, content distribution is really one of the ones that we do every single day and we do the most of. And so typically when we're making the case for why social is an important avenue for content distribution, the 2 questions that we get asked are why social and does it work? And to take you through our sort of rationale for why we do things the way we do, I'll point to a couple Pew research graphs. And so the first one, this is from 2016, pointed out a pretty stark, a pretty clear picture of how many people in the US use social media to consume their news. In particular, we were looking at what sites people use to get their news, and this was 2016, so ignore Vine there at the bottom because that's no longer a thing. But Twitter came out really high, Facebook was really high, Reddit was surprisingly the highest, and I'll speak more about Reddit at the end if there's interest. But primarily we focus on Twitter and Facebook. It's actually interesting because this is from 2016. Twitter has become much more powerful for news distribution than Facebook because of a couple of recent, relatively recent algorithm changes that Facebook's gone through, where news has been a little bit deprioritized on the site. So we really focus on Twitter. And the other graph that was interesting was how the share of people who are using these sites for news has grown pretty much across the board, but most starkly on Twitter and on Facebook. And that trend, this graph is from 2016, but I have no reason to believe that by 2019 the percentages will raise even farther. And so the other thing I'll point out about social media is that it's not just young people who are using it. It's actually across all generations. Use has gone up. In some cases, it's going up faster among certain populations, such as 65 plus, than it is among 50 to 65, which I always thought was pretty interesting. But the notion that social is all young people is becoming less and less easy to argue. It's actually social media is everybody. So a simple case study in the context of getting news out on social. So whenever we have a news release here at the school, it gets published on our website, and that would look like this. And then we also distribute it to our media list via an email. We also send it onto our university news page sometimes, especially if it's like a high-level news release, called The Hub. And this website is kind of the news place for all of the university, not just our school. And then we also put it out on Twitter, and we'll put it out on Facebook, and etc. And what's interesting is that in this particular case study from 2016, we actually saw the most page views come from social media. So really, like, it's an important tool for getting people to see the news that you want to put out, and then hoping it spreads farther beyond them. So to talk another avenue for news distribution, we have this website here called Global Health Now. I apologize if there's background noise right now because of the street sound. But anyway, we have this site called Global Health Now, which is sort of a hub for international news related to global health that isn't specifically tied to our school public health. So whereas our school public health accounts on Twitter are promoting news articles that are featuring our school's researchers or talking about our school's activities, Global Health Now has the flexibility to talk about just major issues in public health, regardless of if our school has a direct tie-in or not. And we launched the website. It actually began first as a daily email, but we launched the website in 2015 in March. We followed it up with a Twitter account about a month later. Almost 2 years later, we launched Facebook page, and then we really began promoting that Facebook page earlier this year. And since that time, this is an example of what the website looks like. And here's an example of the daily email. So this goes out on weekdays every day, and it's sort of a nice rundown of the day's news. And one thing that, from the context of social, that we have started to feel is that with the newsfeed algorithm changes that I've mentioned before on Facebook, increasingly email has become the new Facebook for news consumption. Maybe you can make the case that it's back to email, whereas for a while, because it started as email and then Facebook rose to prominence and now it's back to email. But anyway, we're seeing a lot more engagement on articles that we share in the newsletter than we are on Facebook, at least for organic reach. Here's a continuation of what the email looks like. And we have exclusive articles on the page, on the website, and those are published pretty frequently. Here's a typical Facebook post. But what's interesting is that when we created Global Health Now, we did it deliberately to create a place that added value to readers who were interested in global health and didn't want necessarily only school of public health, Johns Hopkins news. They wanted general global health news. But because we've cultivated this really nice audience now on all of the different areas where Global Health Now publishes, either on the email distribution list, which is pretty large, or on the social media follower accounts, which is pretty large, because we have these buckets of people now, we can intersperse occasionally school public health content and reach them. So for example, last week we had a signatory from the Alma Ata declaration 40 years ago come and visit the school, and we were able to promote that on Global Health Now because that is an event that appeals to all sorts of people. Similarly, when we have when we want to promote something on Facebook, we can share the article and reach a pretty significant large number of people in Global Health Now's audience with articles that are just general interest. And again, here's a school public health event that we're advertising on Global Health Now because the audiences overlap in this case. So regarding recruitment and students, we also use social media to market to prospective students. So we run a pretty robust Facebook ad campaign, identifying several points throughout the year where we want to promote the availability of our programs to students. So we will customize these ads based on the different subject areas and the interests that we think the prospective students might have. Here's an example of one. We also promote webinars on Facebook. So these are, there's two types of ads. So to go back a slide, this sends people to a landing page where they can fill out a form and sign up to learn more about a program. The webinar one goes to an actual webinar, sort of like this one, where people can hear about a program. So we try to offer people different ways to learn about our programs, and we try to market those widely on Facebook. On Twitter, we also do a fair amount of Twitter chats. Typically, the way these work is we will invite an outside or high-level guest to come and be in conversation with faculty at our school, and we'll use our school account to sort of to show the highlights of that conversation, so to speak. So we kind of make our account, the school public health account, like the curator, and then we just encourage people to talk together, because really what people are looking for on Twitter is less promotion and more actual subject matter expertise, and that's what the guests are doing. And they really work. So this is the impressions that we got over the month around the Twitter chat that I had screenshotted before, and you can pretty easily guess which day we reached the most people and which day was the Twitter chat. As others were talking about, we also do a lot of Instagram promotion. So Instagram, and this is actually Katie Overbay, who's one of the this is public health ambassadors. Instagram is where we show off the sights and sounds of the school, for lack of a better term. And we really rely on the students at the school to convey those messages because they know best. They're sort of the lifeblood of the school. And like both Antonio and Alante were saying, students recognize authenticity and they really value it. And we could write a paraphrase of what students are working on, but it's actually much nicer to sit down and interview them and have them be able to convey it in their own words. So we do two different types of student takeovers where we'll allow students to actually take over the account and convey a day in their experience. Or pretty commonly, my colleague Marissa Russell, who I think is on the webinar here, will actually spend time and go interview a student and profile them for Instagram. And I know Antonio said that sometimes people don't like long write-ups, but we've actually found that when we do these little Instagram features, they get a very nice response. So here are a couple more posts from Instagram. This was last week during back to school where we featured a couple of students who shared first day of school photos. I will say one thing about Instagram that's really nice is that you can search all of the photos taken in a specific location and then send messages to the people who posted those photos, usually students or staff, and request that you feature that photo on the school account. And almost always the students are going to say yes. And it's a really nice way of getting content for a lot of the social managers who might be on the call who can't necessarily leave their desk as often as they want to. So we do a lot of this. That's where all these photos came from. And like I said, we do Instagram takeovers, so we'll promote these in advance. We will announce usually the day before, maybe 2 days before, that one is coming up. And then we will hand over the account credentials to a student, and we encourage them to basically use the stories feature and the post feature to just show, what their experience is like all about. It's pretty interesting that like Antonio and also Emily were saying, that we see so much more engagement on these posts, and they often come in the form of like DMs throughout the day. We've sort of established a routine now where students who are taking over the account, we tell them like try to answer as many of the questions and comments as you get, and also we encourage our audience to try to ask as many questions as they get. And the questions and so we've done student takeovers. We also do remote takeovers where people are off campus. So this was a particularly successful one from last summer where these students were actually in Rajasthan. And this was sort of, to Antonio's point, really interesting because they got to actually show their work in the field, not necessarily what they're sitting through in a lecture, because there's only so many times you can show that to the same audience before it loses some of its appeal. We've also done a lot of alumni takeovers, and this was one of the more recent ones, which was arranged by Marissa. And this was an alum who we had first learned about earlier in the year, and it took us a while to get this scheduled, but I'm glad we did it when we did, because a lot of students were coming to campus for new classes right around the time this one rolled out, and it was really cool to show off at the early stage in their student careers what they could look forward to in a career in public health afterwards. This takeover got really, really good engagement. This student was really responsive, and I think that the audience really valued seeing the sort of career options that are available to public health people. If you're interested in seeing our takeovers, so this is a screenshot of our Instagram, you can actually go check out our highlights on our account. So the screen name is Johns Hopkins SPH, and I encourage you to go check that out. It's a good way to get a sort of taste for what sort of content students are putting up on the account. Here's a rundown of a couple of the comments we got from various takeovers over the past, and they're really like if you had found an admissions person from our school and asked, like, what are the comments you most want students to leave, or prospective students to leave on content of ours, what would they be? And you really couldn't you couldn't script up more positive things for people to be saying about what we're doing. So we're really excited about Instagram. I recommend it highly for any social managers out there as a tactic for engaging prospective students and really getting them excited about what the school that you're working for has to offer. So thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you for sharing, Nick. I'm going to have to go and check out that cookbook section. I saw that as a saved hashtag on the Instagram account.
Yeah, so we actually had we unearthed a cookbook that people had made, I think in the 70s here on campus, and we did a whole story about it.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of international recipes in there, which I could get behind. But anyway, so you have Nick and I both on the call. We do still have our 2 ambassadors on the call, but this is a great time where you guys can submit your questions. You should all have a little box looking like this on the right-hand side. So you can go ahead and start typing your questions in there now. And just to answer one that we got throughout the call, so the handout will be available. We're going to email it out along with the recording of this presentation. We're having a few issues with GoToWebinar of they typically host it online and that link isn't working at the moment, but everyone will have access to the handout of the slides and the full recording afterwards. Great. So the first question we have, which I can certainly talk about this, and I think, Nick, it would be good for you to touch on this as well, if there are any rules or guidelines that you have for students prior to providing them the login credentials. So one thing here at ASPPH, so we will send it out about a week in advance, and when we have ambassadors, they go through a training, but then we also give them a tutorial guide so they know how to use both platforms and kind of have an idea of what's appropriate for each of them. So what's appropriate for static post or stories. We kind of trust them. We know that they're not going to be publishing anything that's really inappropriate just because of the audience we're working with and the goals of the campaign. But I don't know if, Nick, there's anything more specific that you guys do with your students or ambassadors beforehand.
Yeah, we have a little one sheet sort of, I want to say it's like a consent form. It's sort of like a permission slip that just says, in so many words, like, I'm going to represent the school in a positive way and not post anything embarrassing. I have talked to colleagues of mine who work at the larger university centrally and deal more with undergrads, and I definitely understand how they can be a little bit apprehensive about turning over an account to, say, a 19-year-old. But in our experience, it's sort of like what you said, Emily. These are mostly graduate students, and they're often more sensitive even to how they're going to be portrayed for, like, in a public setting than we would even ask them to be. So they're very career conscious. They're very professional. We haven't had any issues like that. And then as a general housekeeping thing, we create a fresh login pair of login credentials each time we hand it over, and then we change those immediately after, so that once the takeover is ended, the student actually can't get back into the account even if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Great, and this is kind of along the same lines. So do you provide any oversight approving posts before they are published? Last year for the ambassadors, I requested their introductory post and their final post just as a wrap up, so I could see at least 2 things that they were posting, but we're not doing that this year, so they have free reign. I haven't run into any issues of them posting something that shouldn't be posted, but if so, I can log into the account at any time and delete that.
Yeah, same with that. The only time we've ever dealt with, like, someone who really wanted to see posts before they went live was with the alumni takeover we ran, because her professional organization wanted to make sure she wasn't sharing, like, photos of the labs and proprietary info But with the school, I mean, we kind of take the approach that anything that they would be photographing here on campus is pretty much public. Anyone could be walking by and take the same photo.
Yeah, I think the one big thing, I don't know if you guys do this too or not, Nick, but if any of our students are going to their practicum or going abroad, we try to tell them not to take pictures of students unless they have approval from the teachers in the school to share that, or the parents as well. Really anyone under the age of 18, we try and shy away from them promoting photos of them if they're in it.
Yeah, and so the takeover that we had with the 2 students who were in Rajasthan, they were actually working at a clinic where they were empowering women to go out and like collect sensitive health data around population and family reproductive health. So it was sort of a sensitive thing where you didn't necessarily want to show the clinic walk-in patients or anything like that. So we actually didn't necessarily even have to raise that with the students because they kind of volunteered it right away, and they were like, listen, we're sensitive. So it goes back to what we were saying about authenticity, is like the students know well what is fair game and what isn't. So we sort of allow them to be responsible for that.
Great. So we do have one question about how effective paid social media campaigns are versus organic. I'm going to let you take this, Nick.
Sure. So on Twitter, we have not traditionally run very many paid campaigns. I don't find Twitter's ROI to be very good for paid campaigns. I do think that paid marketing on Facebook is really, really powerful. I don't think there's any other platform right now that gives you the same level of targeting for as low of a cost as Facebook offers. And obviously with Facebook comes Instagram. So you get all the same targeting parameters on Instagram ads that you do on Facebook because Facebook owns Instagram. But it's really a powerful way to reach like a really narrowly defined audience, and also to make sure you're not wasting any money on an audience you already have in your funnel. So one thing that I see a lot of advertisers forget to do is on Facebook, you can exclude certain people from seeing ads. And in the context of being a school, what you really want to do is exclude anyone who's currently at your school from seeing the ad. Not only because you don't want current students to see ads for a thing they're already doing and get annoyed, but also because you are spending money every time someone sees the ad, and you don't want to spend your ad budget on people who are already on your campus. But I would say Facebook and Instagram are really powerful for paid, and LinkedIn for professional programs has been successful in the past. And then obviously there's Google AdWords and search and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Great. This is kind of along the same lines, but would you recommend any social media post promotion strategies in increasing engagement? And what is the key tip for increasing followers?
So I would say the single best thing you can do for increasing, for making a social media post that really gets engaged with, is make sure that the content you're sharing to begin with is something people would want to engage with. So a video, for instance, can be really powerful to share on Facebook if it's a good video that you think people are going to want to watch. I don't know if you're going to see engagement, even if you have the best targeting in the world, if you're sharing like a PDF that you made or something and just paying to show that to people. So I think you need to spend a lot of time dreaming up like what the content is, and then you kind of work from there and build an audience, and then you constantly need to tinker. So sometimes we've gone through this where we'll do a paid campaign towards a website, and on the web page there's like a sign up form, and maybe after the first week of the paid campaign we're finding people aren't actually signing up, but they're seeing the ad because we see the analytics on Facebook. So where is the breakdown? Is that an issue with Facebook not showing it to the right people? Maybe not. Is it an issue with the landing page itself not getting people to sign up? And if so, what can we do with the landing page to make sure that it's easy for people to sign up, it can open on their phones, things like that. So you kind of need to take a critical eye to every piece of the funnel when you're advertising. And sometimes sometimes the obstacle isn't actually the social media platform, it's the website that you're sending them to.
Mm-hmm. Great. So we have 4 questions left, which I think we'll be able to get through. So kind of along those lines is, how do you decide which audience to target for which platforms? So one thing that I can see logging into SOFIS, and this is public health and ASPPH, is I can see the profile of people who are commenting, and you can also get general insights on your population, but it's really good to just log in every once in a while and see who's commenting, see who's liking, and the types of comments and engagements that they have. And that really helps us see what platforms are going to be best for our messages. Right.
Yeah, totally
Nikki,
agree. And
okay.
yeah, in general, we take the stance that Twitter is newsy. Facebook and Instagram are a little more people who have firsthand connections to the school. LinkedIn is a little bit more like school braggy news, like, this program just got funded sort of thing. People like seeing that. So we sort of generally play with those 4 like notions, and then we sort of tweak them as we go.
Mm-hmm. And if you're just getting started, a good thing to start with is really doing that cross promotion and maybe tweaking the content a little bit and seeing how people respond to it differently between Facebook and Twitter and Instagram or LinkedIn. Because you could have the same content posted on all of them, but if it's not gaining any traction on Twitter, maybe that's not the type of content that you should be putting out on there. So really starting off with that cross promotion is a good way to figure out what your audience is like on all of the platforms. Great. So we do have another question. So is there work done directed towards undergrads and undergraduate public health programs? So right now at ASPPH, we don't have any specific strategies to highlight our undergraduate network, but that's something as we roll into October and the new structure for that comes out, that we'll be working with Maggie and Sarah to kind of do a little bit more to promote and just make that more noticeable through the ASPPH brand. All right. And then we have, does anyone use platforms like Hootsuite? So at ASPPH, we use Hootsuite and Meet Edgar, and are hoping to eventually transition into one, because Hootsuite is ever evolving and offering more applications and services. So that's something that we use. I don't know, Nick, if you use similar platforms or kind of just do it organically.
Yeah, so back in the day when the social media team here was really just me, and it was just one person who had to manage it all, I did it mostly on the platforms themselves. So like I would schedule posts on Facebook, and then I would schedule tweets on TweetDeck and etc. But once the team grew and we had more people working in it, we really needed a tool that would have all of them. So we use a paid tool now called Hey Orca, which is really good for teams that need to work collaboratively and like show posts to various people. It has a really good calendar view. I don't recommend it for people unless they have a lot of people who need to be working collaboratively, because it does come with a bit of a steep price point. Hootsuite certainly is one that's really common and powerful to use. So I recommend that one too.
Mm-hmm. And a good thing, I know you can see analytics on Twitter and Facebook, but I feel like having these services essentially to schedule, it gives you a little bit more power, because you can kind of line everything up against each other and see what's going on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and get a little bit more bang for your buck when it comes to analytics.
Totally.
We have one final question. So how do you monitor the comments? Do you ever delete comments or threads? So sometimes we do have to delete things. If it's appropriate for us to respond, we'll respond. But if it's a general, you're always going to have trolls no matter what content you have, no matter what accounts you're working on. So those we tend to delete. If it's someone who, or at least typically will hide it so that they don't see that it's deleted, because then they could just comment on everything and call you out on it. But if it's anything that's like directly negative towards ASPPH, or this is public health or SOFIS, that we can't monitor or fix, we'll kind of delete, because it's not necessarily reflective of our organizations.
Yeah, I will co-sign on hiding over deleting. I think that's a really
Yeah.
good tactic on Facebook. Typically, we don't get very many negative ones, which we're fortunate about, but we do occasionally get um, sort of like dissenting views on articles, especially if they're related to topics like gun control or vaccines or things like that. And in those cases, we almost always find that even if someone makes an initial negative comment, other people who disagree and actually like are usually citing research will sort of self-police as a community, and they'll respond to that person, and usually we encourage that because that's engagement at the end of the day.
Yeah, I can certainly agree with that, that if we do have any dissenting comments, someone probably calls them out on it beforehand and backs up research. But we have one last question. So if you don't mind staying on another minute or two, Nick, is that all right?
Yeah,
Okay.
no problem.
Perfect. So do you ever delete posts from your Instagram account for spring cleaning purposes? Occasionally, we've archived one or two posts on Instagram. Typically, if the resolution isn't as good as we thought it was going to be when posting, or there have been a few ambassador posts that we've hid just because it took up too much of that. Like a general rule is when you go on Instagram, those, what is it, 9 squares that you can see after you scroll through someone's profile should show the versatility of your content. And if you, every once in a while, we'll have ambassadors just post a lot, so we'll hide a few so that we can get some additional posts in that 9 square image.
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't really do much spring cleaning, so to speak. I think we've deleted 1 or 2 posts like in the 5 years I've been here, and usually it's because there was like an inaccuracy in the post that we couldn't fix with an edit, so we had to fix that and repost it, or in a special circumstance if we just determined that we don't necessarily want that post to be up anymore because of something like the account, the original user or something that we featured, we don't want to necessarily promote in that way. But that's really minor. I wouldn't say we go in and regularly clean out things. I think if you go to the account now, you can probably scroll back and find like our first ever post.
Yeah, so it's only been once or twice with us too. Typically, I feel like content is pretty accurate when it comes to at least ASPPH, and this is public health, so we don't do very much in terms of spring cleaning. Occasionally we'll edit like a date or a time if it changes, but otherwise we don't really monitor those very often. Cool. Well, I think those are all of our questions for today. Once again, the webinar recording will be available afterwards, and we will go ahead and make sure that you guys have the slides and the handouts as well. Oh, I thought we were going to have a contact slide, but maybe not. But we will go ahead and wrap up. And once again, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you to our ambassadors, and thank you for Nick for joining us as well. And we'll make sure that in that email, when you have the recording and that handout, that our contact information will be in there as well, just in case there are any follow-up questions.
Yeah, thank you, Emily.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.